Something set the internet on fire about Wicked for good. And it wasn't the movie itself. It was the very clear snub it received at the 2026 Oscars nominations. Regardless of whether you loved it or hated it, whether you're an Ariana Grande fan or not, there's a question I think deserves a deeper conversation. Objectively speaking, was it coherent that it didn't receive a single nomination? What about the technical side? And how much does the human factor influence this process? Should it have been nominated or not? Welcome. This is Conscious Conversations, and today we're going to try to answer those questions, to understand what really happened with Wicked for Good, and what many consider one of the most controversial Oscar snubs in recent years. For context, I love Wicked. I love Ariana Grande. But I've also studied marketing, advertising, and film, professionally. And precisely because of that, it's impossible for me not to separate what I felt when I saw the snub from what actually happened. Because one thing is emotion, and another thing is asking, was this coherent? I'm not here to say it should have won everything. I'm not here to say it's perfect. I'm here to ask whether, technically speaking, it had enough arguments to at least be in the conversation. If we analyze this from a technical standpoint, from what the Academy usually rewards, from how voting actually works, from the inevitable human bias that exists in every category, was the Wicked for Good snub truly unjustifiable? Or is that just emotion talking? Before going category by category and explaining where I believe it clearly deserved to be nominated and why, we need context. Very briefly, let's look at what the Academy tends to reward, and perhaps more importantly, what it tends to ignore. Because without that framework, any analysis becomes fanatical, and that's not what we do here. Before defending any category, we need to understand something basic. The Oscars are not a magical entity that decides what was best. They are people, voting. The Academy is divided into branches. Actors vote for actors. Directors vote for directors. Designers vote for design, and so on. And yes, in theory, each branch should evaluate the technical work of its field. But this is an industry. And where there's industry, there's narrative. There are campaigns. There's public perception. There are sympathies. There is fatigue. And that's not a conspiracy theory. It's simply human. Historically, the Academy tends to reward serious dramas, extreme physical transformations, biopics, films perceived as important. What it tends to keep at a distance, massively commercial cinema, sequels, musicals that don't fit the classic prestige narrative, and yes, pop stars crossing into film. There is a historical bias there, not always declared, but it exists. When a singer transitions into acting, often it's not just the performance being evaluated. It's the brand, the public image, the overexposure. And even though that shouldn't influence voting, it does. Now, there's something else interesting. When a film becomes a cultural phenomenon, huge box office, massive online conversation, digital impact, it usually enters the awards conversation, even if it doesn't win, because cultural noise tends to drag nominations with it. So the question here isn't, was it perfect? The question is, was it coherent that it wasn't even in the conversation? Because losing is one thing, disappearing is another. And with that framework clear, now we can go category by category and see whether, technically speaking, there were real arguments. Let's start with something completely technical, something that has nothing to do with whether you like Ariana or not. Makeup and hairstyling. How is it possible that, for example, Bach's transformation into the Tin Man wasn't even considered in this category? We're talking about real prosthetics, practical makeup, physical work done on the actor, and a visual result that doesn't feel cartoonish or overly digital, but tangible. Didn't that at least deserve a nomination? And that's not the only example. Yes, we have the big, visible transformation, the kind the Academy usually loves. But there's also much more subtle work. The passage of time is communicated through faces, through skin texture, through small details that make a completely fictional world feel real. Elphaba doesn't look like a special effect. She looks like a person within that world. And there's something else that matters. The film wasn't afraid to lose the pretty aesthetic. In scenes where Glinda emotionally breaks, the makeup runs. The mascara isn't perfect. They don't protect the image. They let the pain look uncomfortable. That's narrative makeup. So when we talk about this category, we're not talking about it looks nice. We're talking about transformation, aesthetic coherence, and artistic choice. And technically, that is nomination-worthy work. If makeup builds the face of the character, production design builds the world they live in. And here, Wicked for Good had very strong arguments. In an industry where more and more is done in front of green screens, this film chose to build. Build a university. Build a city. Build palaces. Build texture. We're not just talking about pretty backgrounds. We're talking about architecture with identity. Oz doesn't feel like a digital backdrop. It feels like a place you can breathe in. And that changes everything. When actors walk, touch, lean, interact with something real, the performance changes. The camera changes. The energy changes. Yes, there is CGI, but it's used to expand the world, not replace it. That, in today's Hollywood, is not the norm, and that's also an artistic decision. Coordinating a musical of this scale, choreography, extras, camera movement, physical sets working together, isn't just spectacle, it's precision. It's planning. It's intentional world building. So the question comes back. If this category historically rewards well-constructed worlds, how was it not at least in the conversation? If makeup builds the face, production builds the world, costume design builds identity. And here, again, there is a strong argument. In Wicked for Good, costume isn't decoration, it's narrative. Take Elphaba. Her aesthetic evolves, yes, but not because she wants to please or stop pleasing anyone. What we see is coherence with her principles. Her garments incorporate more organic patterns, references to nature, rougher textures. Her hair becomes looser, freer. It's not neglect, it's conviction. She continues fighting for what she believes is right. She remains faithful to her values, even after the system has excluded her. And that's reflected visually. She's not designed to fit in, she's designed to stand firm. Now, Glinda is more complex, because Glinda lives in constant duality. She's a public figure, a symbol, a performance. Much of the film shows her navigating the tension between what she projects and what she's starting to question internally. And you see that in the color. It's no longer the pure, bright pink innocence of the first act. There are blends, lilacs, cooler tones. It's the same character, but threaded with doubt. What's interesting is that the story begins and ends with the iconic pink dress. The silhouette is similar. The public image remains, but the meaning changes. At the beginning, pink represents ego, privilege, comfort within the system. At the end, pink represents conscious choice. She accepts her position of power. She accepts that the world doesn't function as she once imagined, and she still chooses to try to do good from within that position. That's internal evolution, not radical aesthetic change. And when a film uses color, texture, and visual continuity to reflect psychological transformation without spelling it out in dialogue, that's costume design doing narrative work. So again, if this category rewards costume that builds arc and world, how was it not nominated? If makeup builds the face, production builds the world, costume builds identity, sound builds emotion. And in a musical, that's not a detail. That's the spine. Let's talk about sound. We're not talking about it sounds nice. We're talking about an incredibly complex mix. Voices, orchestra, ambience, dialogue, songs, movement, and everything still has to feel clear, natural, and emotionally precise. There's also something that matters deeply to me. Much of the vocals were recorded live, not just studio-perfect playback. Real-time performance, real breath, real emotion. And you can hear it. Emotion doesn't enter only through lyrics. It enters through tremble, through air, through intention, through humanity. Then there's the more invisible layer, how music functions narratively. Not just the song, but what sits underneath. Fragments, motifs, echoes, moments where your brain may not consciously register the melody, but your body does. That's part of why this story moves people so deeply. When the film drops a musical hint that recalls tension, friendship, betrayal, or grief, you feel more than you think you do. That's sound telling story. And there's something else important to say, calmly. When an actor transforms their vocal technique to build a character, not just sing beautifully, but change placement, diction, style, intention, that's interpretive work. It's not makeup on the face, it's makeup on the voice. And I'll leave that there because now we're entering Ariana. But before we do, I'll close this category with the same question. If sound in a musical literally holds the entire experience together, how was it not even in the conversation? We've talked about makeup, production, costume, sound. Technical categories, cold, objective. But there's one category that, for me, is impossible to ignore. Best Supporting Actress. Ariana Grande as Glinda. And before anyone says, of course, she's a fan, let's breathe. I'm not saying she should have won. I'm saying she had real arguments to be nominated. Because Glinda is not an easy character. It's comedy without becoming caricature, privilege without becoming villain, ego without losing humanity, constant performance with internal fractures. And sustaining that for an entire film without breaking tone is extremely difficult. When we talk about transformation at the Oscars, we often think of visible change. But some transformations aren't seen, they're heard. And this is where Ariana Grande's work as Glinda deserves serious analysis. She did not sing like Ariana. She didn't use her pop voice. She didn't use her usual placement. She didn't use her contemporary style. She retrained her instrument. The vocal placement is different. The diction is more theatrical. The breath support shifts. The projection is built from the character, not the singer. A clear example is No One Mourns the Wicked. We're not hearing a pop star belting an impressive high note. We're hearing Glinda sustaining a public narrative. Its brightness, with internal tension. Its power, controlled by character. That requires technique, because the voice is muscular. Changing how you breathe, support, articulate, and project for an entire film isn't cosmetic. It's retraining. It's discipline. It's interpretive decision-making. And when other performers are recognized for the transformation they undergo to embody a character, why doesn't a transformation this evident enter the same conversation? Even the harshest critics have acknowledged one thing: Glinda's comedy works. Yes, the biggest comedic explosion happens in the first film. That's where the character shines with full lightness. But that doesn't mean it disappears in Wicked for good. The comedy is still there. It just now coexists with drama. And sustaining comedy in a character who is already emotionally fractured is much harder. Comedic timing isn't being funny. It's rhythm. It's pause. It's knowing exactly how long to hold a look before the punchline. It's cutting a line half a second earlier than expected. It's using silence as part of the joke. That's technique. And something crucial: Ariana's comedy never feels external to the character. It's not an actress delivering a joke. It's Glinda reacting from her internal logic. The gestures, the posture, the tilt of the head, the micro-pauses before speaking, everything is calibrated. When comedy is so well executed that it feels spontaneous, it's because it's precisely measured. Well-done comedy is invisible, and invisible work is rarely rewarded. But that doesn't make it less technically demanding, because making people laugh without breaking the tone of a story that's also about power, manipulation, guilt, and loss isn't easy. And this leads us to something deeper. The hardest thing isn't making people laugh. It's making people laugh while the character is already breaking inside. And that brings us to subtext. If vocal transformation shows technique and comedy shows control, what truly tests an actress is subtext. And this is where, for me, Ariana Grande's work as Glinda becomes impossible to ignore. Glinda is not a character who says what she feels. Glinda performs being okay. She performs optimism. She performs brightness. She performs control. Regardless of what's happening inside, she may be doubting, she may be hurt, she may be losing everything. But outwardly, she holds the smile. And that makes the subtext harder, because we're not watching a woman constantly unraveling. We're watching a woman forcing herself to stay composed, while internally she begins to fracture. After defying gravity, when she chooses to stay, she isn't a villain. She's a girl who believes she can change the system from within. Years later, when we return to her as a public figure, we see her sustaining a narrative, while internally she's beginning to crack. In Thank Goodness, the song isn't just celebration, it's self-convincing. The lyric asks, who wouldn't be happier? But the voice breaks. The eyes don't celebrate. The body is rigid. That's not a missed note. That's a decision. It's a woman telling herself she should be happy while suspecting she isn't. That's played in micro-gestures, in how she looks at Fiyero, in how she maintains a smile when watched, in how her tone shifts when she's alone. Later, when she blurts out the line that sets devastating consequences in motion, use her sister. It's not cold malice, it's emotional overflow. It's someone wounded speaking before thinking. That's humanity. Then the destroyed wedding, the tears, the almost choked, I'm not that girl. She could have sung it perfectly. She could have showcased the voice. She doesn't. She sings broken, with air, with fractured breath, because the character is broken. That's prioritizing truth over display. The scene where Fiyero is captured, it's not a grand monologue, it's tension, it's looks, it's everything that happens before words. When Fiyero points the weapon and looks at her, she doesn't react with exaggerated panic. There's a brief resignation, a silent, "Are we really doing this?" in her eyes. When he lowers it and the guard sees him, everything shifts. She tries to intervene, but the strongest moment isn't what she says, it's when she kneels in front of him, when he apologizes, and she responds with tenderness. Not anger, not wounded pride. Tenderness. A soft, "It's okay," that isn't okay, but that she chooses to give anyway. When she tells the guards he wasn't going to hurt her, that he's in love, there's no jealousy, there's acceptance. That's growth. When they drag him away and she screams his name, it's not just romantic pain, it's the collapse of everything she was trying to hold together. And all of that, before the next musical number, was already told through her face, through breath, through posture. That's acting. Later, when she confronts Madame Morrible, we don't see doubt anymore. We see clarity. In The Girl in the Bubble, there's no caricature. There's a woman admitting for the first time out loud that she lived inside a bubble. When she sings that final line, when she accepts the bubble must pop, it's not euphoria, it's resignation and decision. Then comes For Good. And this isn't just two people trying not to cry, it's something far more mature. Two women acknowledging they weren't perfect, that they hurt each other, that they made mistakes, but that they were transformed because of one another. For Good isn't just goodbye, it's gratitude. It's saying, because of you, I am who I am, for good. And that's acted. In how they hold each other's gaze, in how the voice trembles without breaking the melody, in how they try to stay steady because this might be the last time. It's not melodrama, it's awareness of loss. And when separation comes, when reality imposes itself, we see the break. Not in a speech, not in exposition, in the body, in the breath, in the trembling hand. When she believes her best friend has melted, we see it in silence, in eyes that look empty but aren't, in contained grief finally allowed to surface. And still, at the end, after being left alone, she chooses to do good. That's arc. That's evolution. That's layered performance. And so my question returns. When an actress sustains comedy, subtext, emotional rupture, vocal restraint, and psychological evolution in one character, isn't that, at the very least, nomination material? We've talked about makeup, production, costume, sound, and acting. Not from fandom, not from uncontrolled emotion, from technique, from decisions, from what can be analyzed. So let's return to the original question. Did Wicked for Good have real arguments for nomination? I'm not saying it should have won everything. I'm not saying it's flawless. I'm saying that in multiple categories, there was solid technical work. World building, visual narrative, conscious vocal choices, subtext sustained for hours. And when that exists, the minimum expectation is conversation, because losing is part of the game. But disappearing from the conversation is something else. The Oscars are not an absolute measure of quality. They're a human institution, with narratives, preferences, franchise fatigue, conscious or unconscious bias. That doesn't invalidate the award, but it doesn't invalidate analysis either. If a film moves millions, if entire theaters cry, if it sustains technique and emotion simultaneously, that's merit. And merit doesn't vanish just because there isn't a trophy. Sometimes a snub says less about the work and more about the cultural moment in which the award is given. This isn't about defending an artist or a film because I like it. It's about recognizing work when I see it. If, after analyzing it calmly, category by category, we can still argue there was real nomination material, then this conversation isn't fandom emotion, it's analysis. And if there's one thing I want you to take from this video, it's this. Awards can define temporary prestige, but cultural impact, technical construction, and emotional connection, that defines legacy. And that conversation, the conscious conversation, is worth more than any trophy. If this kind of reflection interests you, if you enjoy taking a topic, any topic, and looking at it more deeply, calmly, with nuance, this is your space. This is Conscious Conversations. We're not staying on the surface here. We question, we analyze, we feel, and we think. If you want more conversations like this, subscribe and tell me in the comments, which category do you think was the most debatable? I'll see you in the next conversation.